Okay, so those who are interested in PFP or Gravimeter or not, welcome to the breakout session. See, Paul is like running away. So you can learn the beautiful world of gravimetry. So I'd like to then introduce ourselves first because that's the whole point of our VTech. Would you like to start with Tara?
Oh, hi, I'm Tara. I'm the new technical services manager.
Woo!
Yeah, I've got a fun title. Thank you.
Yeah. All right.
My name is Jenny. I'm a tech on school.
Yes. Little sale soon?
Yeah.
Yeah. Honolulu to Ponape. Okay.
I'm Patrick Ahern. I'm in the tech pool. That's all.
Dealing with instrumentations a lot too.
I'm Hannah. I'm the tech manager for the Antarctic program.
Who helps us a lot. Really.
I'm Paul Wolzak. Wearing a Mars Sand today.
Thank you.
Kevin Conrad, new co-director of Mars Sand. Ryan Guest, manager of the East Coast Switchboard.
Uh-oh, am I speaking? Anyway, Bruce, for second speak. I kind of oversee the gravimeter on the MVP.
Nice place.
Brandon, Retech, the board receipt.
Carmen, I'm Tech on the split.
Thank
Ross Hine, I'm the science mission coordinator on Antarctic Research Festival.
Barbara Callahan, wire.
I'm Eric Trotta, Wirepool.
Eric Gagan, the engineer at FUI,
And?
and becoming very involved.
Sheila Cáceres, research assistant at Observatory.
I'm James Walton. I'm the Federal Oceanographic for CTV and manufacturer.
Michael Jones, I'm a security analyst at Masako.
John, computer scientist for Thompson.
Chris Greiner, who we do SSP group and sometimes magnetometer stuff.
Yes.
I'm Ella Searholm. I'm a ship tech on the Atlantis.
Yes. Yes. Good to see you finally.
Nice to see you. I'm really
Hi.
I'm in charge of the data acquisition system on the MVP as well as multimedia.
Are we still together?
Yes.
Yes. Awesome.
With high season.
Yes.
ARS and
Thank you.
I'm Maya. I'm an instrumentation tech on the Scripps vessels.
I usually use a part time to make sure we are doing great out there and tackling issues. So I would like to just cover, to start with, we tend to forget or want to forget why it's important, why we're doing the marine gravimetry. And then one more time, recap where we're going with current BGM3 and the BGS operations. And some lower clarity from the recent event on Rebel.
Yeah.
That we had a really interesting interaction amongst script stacks, big geophysics PI group, and PFP. And also the best practice for gravity land ties, which requires a lot of your side of the effort, and then not necessarily the most favorite thing is to do the protocol, but why it's important. And then other kind of sharing the knowledge using the new Gravimeter. So, okay, I put this together like last night, 2 minutes before I fell asleep after a nice series of beer and a cocktail. So sorry, this should be the page 2 should be page 1 on the record. Okay, so why it's important? I briefly mentioning about National Geospatial Agency, which is one of the DoD sector. Their interest is to understand the shape of Earth as precise as possible. And to do that, we need to get as much gravimeter data as possible, and then match that to the satellite coverage. Shipboard gravimeter data is always so-called ground truth at the sea level measurements. And so, for example, you know the Professor Dave Sandwell of Scripps. He is the geodesic gravimeter person, and then he get a lot of data from our vessel effort, operation effort, and then provide some model for them, for example, to create this true Earth surface geometry. Why it's important? I'm not gonna say a whole sentence, but just think it's a defense. What do they have to do to send something over air to get to a precise location to land or explode, whichever. So that's why they're very, very interested in. And so that's a DoD, NGA, Geospatial Agency side of the importance. Navy, of course, is really interested in where are the seamounts or any topographic high on the seafloor behind which the submarine can hide. And most of the satellite data cannot detect these small divots on the seafloor, so that, for example, the Arctic and then also the Southern Ocean, we get a lot of interest from them. So often we get inquiry from them that, hey, can you send us some of these R2R data? And then we do. In return, we receive the 2 gravimeter, which is on the ride and Atlantis right now on their dime. And also that one, unfortunately not working, land meter, CG5 meter.
Yeah.
So we have we kind of put the common interest and then share the resource. Scientifically, I don't have to say much geological process. Yeah.
What's the scale on the visual from
This
dark blue to red? Yeah, percentage wise.
I think this is only so this coloration is the residual anomalies, so that we are not looking at the actual gravity anomaly measured. And I do believe it is really I cannot say precisely, but it's a really narrow range. We are looking at plus minus 10 legal or something like that. And go back. So let's recap where we are at. So right now, what we think, PFP thinks meters are working well on Revel, just because she has been in Woods Hole entire summer, fall. And so we visit every port period, and Eric and Maya, Max, Murray were basically producing a lot of Thai data to check the health of the meter. And then Sikiriak, we visited April, and then working well with some funky things we discovered together. We're going to touch upon that. And then Ride, the meter is doing great.
Yeah.
And Palma, last season, we had a good end-to-end tie between the end of the season, and then hopefully we can do that for beginning of the season soon to the end going forward this year. I do not have yet the best grip on Atlantis and Thompson, just because we have not had a chance to visit the vessel from our standpoint. I know you guys are doing great, but you know, I think once we I think Tom was there on Atlantis very recently and they installed a new GUI for the grab tie. But we have not actually had a chance to take a look the longer term data products. So we'll try to do that with Atlantis soon. And then Thompson, she's been kind of circumnavigation for like a year and a bit. So it's very difficult to not only access, they have hard time to actually land, do the land tie. It's not accessible in the middle of the India or like Maldives, all these exotic port, unfortunately, with some restriction to step into part of the jungle and towns. So I would like to follow up on Thompson, hopefully in January in Guam. So I'm gonna get off the Sikuria in Ponape, fly to Guam to meet Thompson. That's like 2 days right there. So that's my hope. As I said, Lanxess deserves new meter. They go just everywhere in the international port each time. Jesus and Sean are working so hard. You imagine the ITAR rewriting a license, getting the approval. So Jesus and I briefly touched upon that with Tim before lunch. And then, so we're gonna map out what would be possible. Kiwawana and Healy, Healy-wise, I'm gonna talk to the Frank at the OPP Arctic program to see what's their science program going forward. And Kiwawana, right now, we are still operating BGM3. Big empathy for their techs, but it is going to be depending on the fate of that particular vessel. We currently do not operate any gravimeter on Armstrong, and this is a little bit of the issue that this astronaut class vessel going to the Greenland, Arminga, very important part of the world's ocean, do not have a gravimeter. It is a little bit of our reservation to put the entire BGM3 meter back on that vessel. We're gonna basically suffer Sarah's program with the ITER issues, but also we're counting down the really handful remaining gyros spares and also computer unit. Which goes first? Whichever goes first, we're done to support BGM3. So next year or two, I would love to see these two vessels goes up there, and then Healy and Kiwawana have more vision on their side, so we can specifically strategize our support for that. Now, have you seen our new documentation that includes this flow chart? Operators. What? Jenny? Carmen?
I think I've seen
Okay, all right. So finally, because we have 6 DGS meters operated now, we created new corporate knowledge to share. And there are 2, or I would say 3 important documentation. If your team does not have one or you haven't seen it, let us know. So one is this gravity land tie kind of step-by-step manual to use the MATLAB GUI. So this is the replacement of old BGM3 laptop. We're not gonna send you laptop anymore. That's a little bit ridiculous. So, and then now most of the academic institution comes with MATLAB license, site license. So it's just easily just install it in one of the computer and make sure that the data are still logged during the core period when you're doing the time. So that is the manual number 1. Number 2 is kind of best practice check this torque switches on. All the cables are connected well. Check the laptop so that the 81 amps, .dat file have been accumulating over time. And the third one is actually written by vendor, DGS company, requested by Securiac after we needed best documented startup and then shut down protocol. And so those three are the key documentation. If you don't have it, let me know, and hopefully that will help you. So here we are doing the gravity tie and land tie are annoying. I know that. Believe me, I know that, and particularly when you have to find that metal thing in the middle of nowhere in general, you bushwhack. What is this like 1980s, almost 100 map? Where is this? We've done that. But most of the operators are doing great, but I think some new members to the team, or when you have a big generation turnover in your team, this knowledge or practice just disappear. And that's when we have a hard time chasing down, okay, did you do the tie? Don't get, please, annoyed by those emails. Please do the tie. When will be the last one? Where did you do that? Send us the data. So here, Maya could tell us, what do you do on the Scripps ship?
So our protocol is if we know where a land tie is or a grav tie local to the ship, we will typically do a grav tie or land tie within or after the first 24 hours our ship is docked and we are done with crane ops and the ship is kind of settled itself out. We have been, as Masako said, our Revel ship has been in and out of this hole pretty much since June. So we've used those ties at the dock, those marks. San Diego, where our home port is, we have those as well. But Revel also in the past year has gone international. And so ahead of where we're going foreign, we would email PFPE and say, hey, these are our ports that we're supposed to go to. Do you guys have land tie marks? If so, could you let us know the coordinates? Could you let us know the location? They'll typically send you a sheet with like the dot and then coordinates, and you're like, okay, I hope it's still there. And that's, as this graph states, if it's further than 50 meters away from where the ship is docking. But typically we try our hardest in our port period to do a grav tie every single time our ships come into dock. So both Ride and Rebel, as well as Healy. And that is,
Have you ever had any pushback that we really have to do the tie during this protocol? So many times in Newport, for example, or so short, we only have like a day and a half.
yes. I think we do try to make it a priority to try to get a land tie. We do know sometimes there's a short work period, or the land tie is like an hour drive away or something that makes it a little bit more difficult, or some of the locations are not there or underneath the building now or behind a fence. We did try it in Shipyard in Alameda. I think the PFP sent us like 5 locations that were supposed to be within the shipyard area, and one of my coworkers was like, I can't find them. So we just, the closest one was like a drive away, and at that point it was, we wait till San Diego. But we do try our hardest to do a land tie or grav tie when we're in port.
So do you have anything that you want to share with us, like about this grav tie, land tie practice? Frequency, regularity?
Masako,
yes.
do you get feedback from like Scripps? Like, there's a building on top of that now, or it's in a secure naval facility. You can't get there.
Mhm.
Do you update your anti system? So you know
Yes.
that that's not a good one anymore.
So, this is something that interesting communication that we had, I think earlier this year with one of the Atlantis Tech that, they asked us, okay, where is the tie location? And then we provide. The person had the greatest idea that, well, can we just share this to the RV Tech mailing list so like everybody has one? We wish. The answer is yes. However, the tie location information is from our semi-secure list of deep archive from National Geospatial Agency. It's supposed to be proprietary. So I could, for example, send that to you for one-time use for your own archive, but not for share. And I know it sounds very redundancy, but the same location, right goes.
Yeah, so we actually use, I think, what you're talking about, we actually used that one 4 months later, and we had to go through the protocol of contacting PFPE and saying, I know there's a location here, could you please send us the coordinates so that we can then use it when we get there?
So the actual list is really tied to National Geospatial Agency, and the status of updates are really up to them. So if the location, this exotic port, I looked at this location is really kind of suspicious and handwritten, and then I don't think this 1978, mark is still there. If it's so suspicious, we ask them, hey, is there any new effort to establish the gravity station? Sometimes answer is yes, and sometimes not, because there is a team at the NGA, that DoD sector, travel around the world, and then it's their job to bring the so-called absolute gravimeter with a 5 CZ5 or 6 to survey that mark. Ideally every 5 years, but imagine if they ever can cover entire world stations. So it's really up to them. Yeah.
I was just curious, when you give someone a location, a new one to them, do you have the information of like the last time someone tied to it?
Yes, so that is the report I usually request from the ship. When you do the tie, let us know. And with this new gravimeter, if you punch through 11 steps, if you remember that, 11 steps, punch in numbers, and then you can generate this like a little report sheet,
Right.
and then you just send this to us. So when you start, we'll practice with, Palmer soon, probably during the December month. So what these little seeds tell us is that first and foremost, we're looking at the number here from the calculation of DGS meter bias. The most of the time, the difference between this one and the previous tie about the meter itself is a 0.15 milligo or something like that. And then with that little change, consistent over time, we call it, okay, meter is working stable, working very well, drift is consistent, linear over time. So that's like a one number I'm always checking. But other parts of the, these gravity reading from the actual lung meters, we can also tell lung meter is working well or not. And then, you just pointed out accumulation of these tie data with a specific location. We could monitor who did where and when.
I was thinking too, like if it's a tie that someone's used in the last year or two, maybe you're going to look really hard for it. But if it's a tie that someone used 15 years ago,
right?
Like,
right. So, yeah. So that's the.
Do you get these quick enough to do QC on and say, hey, this number is off from what we expect?
Yes.
You go do another one.
Yes. easiest thing is that sometimes we get very interesting weird number for the water height. For example, it goes with an inch instead of the meter, and then that just make everything like what the
400 meters.
yeah, it happened. So it's a lot of data that we can kind of accumulate, but it takes time because if you're only having like 2-3 points, and then for some reasons you shut down the gravimeter, basically, we have to establish the record again. So there are many details to hear about as well. Any other challenges you want to share about gravimeter, the gravity tide, land tide? We'll come back to this. And so I think I will ask Maya to share what had happened. This is almost like, what do you call the What Went Wrong Wednesday, PFE version. And we all script somewhat how they handle this situation very well, but we have to be better, support our team behind that was the learning lesson. So share. Which Isabel. PI first. Yeah. So how did you? So when this geophysics PI who requested the gravimeter data.
Okay, so this past spring, summer, PI came on and was very interested in gravity data, wanted a land tide at the beginning of the cruise and wanted the land tide at the end of their cruise. We started their cruise in Costa Rica. They disembarked in the Galapagos. So I did a land tie in Costa Rica. And then because we were anchoring in the Galapagos and they all got off, we couldn't do a land tie or grav tie there because we were anchored and we were not connected to any dock. So they had to wait until we got back to San Diego for their end of cruise land tie, grav tie. When they looked at the grav tie data that I did, land tie data that I did in Costa Rica, it was not accurate. That was a whole other reason due to most likely our land meter. But then I had to go back and get data from the workers from the grav tie that we did before the ship left San Diego.
And during the cruise, they were asking a lot of.
During the cruise, I don't know exactly what this PI thought our responsibility was on the ship in terms of providing data. I'm an instrumentation tech, so I provide data. I do not post-process on our scripts vessels. But they were like pretty much asking me how to read the files, how to get this data, what does this data mean, what was the, within each column, what does this value stand for? And I had to essentially reach out to PFPE and say, could you help out? I gave them the manual, gave them everything that they had, but post that, we do not post-process on our end as text, as scripts. And so it would be expectations of what the PI expected from us versus what they needed from post-processing, I guess.
When you did cruise planning,
Yes.
did they make it clear that that's what they wanted?
No.
Scope creep.
Yeah, and then, so this particular event touches on many of the top 3 points here on the slide. And then, yeah, share this ended up with.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so PIs were not happy and about how unsmooth to decipher the data from this new gravimeter, so they wrote in a peaker. And so for PFPE, what could we have done better to support? So how about when you have the specific PI groups who check the box gravity data, I would say we prepare like one pager, what to expect with this new DGS meter. And then this is our responsibility, and this is the vessel operator, SSSG can provide ties. If not during your particular port call for different reasons, we can still provide the closest, nearest in the past and the future to close that loop. And then we emphasize that this is generating the similarly precise marine gravimeter gravity data, but the system is different. So the output format is different. Here are the manuals. This is some post-processing code that we provided. They completely did not like it, but we could at least proactively warn them. Is that gonna help to mitigate this type of event? It was not pretty emails. I have to step in and
So, question about when we have other systems and we know a PI doesn't know how to process the data, and they are also self-aware that they don't know and they need help. Often we'll go to like the tech pool and we'll say, hey, we need a mapping tech to just come and process data for this PI because they don't have that. We build it into all of our grants, the ability to do that. If we ever came across a situation like this, we reached out to you, would you sail somebody on that cruise?
I don't think we need to sell anybody. The reason are two. One, currently we have the beyond expanded bandwidth to communicate small amount of data compared to multi-beam, that gets like terabytes, right? With the water column data. The day worth of gravimeter data is nothing. So you can just transmit with the email attachment. That's what we usually do with any vessel. Similarly, you could send that to us with prescribed resource available to support that effort. But I don't think we can routinely do that. It needs to come with very specific scientific justification, but also myself as a geophysicist have to process data. Or at least interested in looking into, instead of getting mad with this format, get excited about, let's decipher this like a puzzle, right? So sorry, it was very much a big learning lesson that it was expanding. I would not say exploded, but how were you okay, Amasha?
Yeah, I mean, I just had to tell them that I don't post-process, but we are here to provide the data for you. And here are the manuals, and here is what we can provide. And from there, you need to figure out how to get the data that you want from the data that we're collecting.
Yeah. So we currently, and then hopefully, do not have to do the post-processing. That is a scientist's purview. They get funded to do that part. That's a part of the science. But we do check the data. We have an ability to assess whether or not these data are sound or not. And that's the extent as a specialized services program we would like to undertake. Even for the data QA, I hope I can clone myself for that, but I just can't. So I have discussed with, I think, end of Jim's time, and they reconfirmed with Tim to capitalize on ever available geophysics postdocs 3 months afterward. So that this person, they're rotating every couple of years, but available geophysicist who could take a look. And that's how I kind of internally outsource it. Okay, take a look, track, monitor these vessels, just meter health, etc. So that's how we support you all. Yeah. Any other points you wanted to say?
Well, these are the problems.
Or the programs that happen? Sorry. Couple of troubleshooting cases. So, Carmen, do you remember the ghost mouse thing? Mouse? What do you call it?
Oh,
Crazy mouse?
we got a
thing?
serial mouse. Yeah, we got a crazy mouse.
Yeah, crazy mouse. Have you heard of crazy mouse? Okay, all right. But we couldn't figure out what was going on that DGS laptop for a while.
I thought we squashed that bug pretty quick, but I hadn't seen Crazy Mouse in a long time.
Okay. Okay, so that was the one on the Security Act. But the other one, would you like to talk about this torque switch thing or?
Right, so we got into some rough seas. Actually, I think it was the cruise that Jenny and I were together, and it was still a very new system for us, and we just kind of felt it was rough enough to secure the meter. And we did so, but we didn't really have any documentation, so it was just based on what we knew up to that point about the system. And there's like a little torque breaker that you pull out to open it, and we didn't really know anything about that, so we didn't touch that. And we think that the fact that we clamped the meter, the table, it was still actively trying to level itself, and so it probably blew that circuit, that breaker. And then when it came time to turn that system back on, that breaker was still, we were still unaware of that component. And so the table was left to kind of be subject to the ship's movement as opposed to actively leveling itself. And this went on for a couple of months until somebody noticed that something wasn't quite right. And so this is how we got Nigel involved in providing vendor-based documentation on startup and shutdown.
Yeah, so
It's probably something like a manual of some sort.
Yes.
Documentation. Well, it's part of a new system, and so
so right, Revel had a similar.
Rebel, yeah, the torque button as well popped out at one point. Probably when we were in rougher seas. No one quite realized it. I mean, we did realize it within a decent amount of time, but like it did pop out, and that was one of the things to make the meter work. Read again.
Yes.
I mean, that's interesting because when you started enrolling these at first, we were really all concerned about the fact that they were run on big ships in fair weather in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yes.
And now we're putting them on research vessels that are much smaller, that go all over the world.
Yes. So there was so 2020, this November, December 2020, we started testing out this DGS meter on Armstrong first. Why Armstrong? Because it was in the Hui port and it was still in COVID. That was the only vessel we could access. And then quickly, to your point, we found out this meter was originally designed for very calm sea. And the company had to realize, oh, open ocean has waves, yes. And in the very three-dimensional sense. So quickly we had to pack it up and then send that back so that they can modify the dynamic feedback system on the 3-axis on the electric board to accommodate, it has to be faster feedback system with respect to the motion. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to compensate that motion. When I was on ride, June 2023-ish last year, one interesting fact I noticed is that the meter is rather stable on the calm sea. So we're off California or
We're up in
Oregon.
Newport.
Okay, Oregon. Very it's mirror calm. And then we have this 6 or 8 seconds, Pacific swell only. We're doing the heat flow probing, so station to station. At the station, when we do the heat flow probe, we're on the DP. That's the noisiest signal. Because the ship is trying to stay stationary and they hear this swell is coming and then have this really nice big 3D motion. And then so the data are up. And then once we are underway on the calm sea, it was really pretty. So that is a very much of the sensor specific characters that we have to, or as your physicist should kind of notice and know. But compared to BGM3, it has a little bit of motion susceptible characters, and particularly the some rough sea. Some. It's up to you to decide when to secure the meter. But when you look at the meter is kind of starts swinging a little bit out of that outer, what do you call it, external frame. And then also when you look at the air damper at the leg, and then if it's not effectively working, that's time to secure. And then torque switch. We now have a manual, but it's been a learning experience between the vendor and then operator, including us. So thanks
Is
for
it
your
worth the
patience.
vendor turning the crank one more time and getting another model that has more travel?
So one idea, they have not gotten there yet, is that they have this specific meter that goes on the airplane. So the Lamont Antarctic program, the Dave Porter's program actually, they have many of these DGS that goes on the little airplane to do the survey. They have a much wider dynamic range and faster feedback loop. But I heard that on the airplane, when you do the turn, that's when the G force is affecting the meter. So they have to manually clamp and unclamp.
Oh, they do. Oh.
Right. So that's just a practice. So we haven't been looking into this issue and also feeding them a lot of data so they can take a look. So that's where we are at right now.
So it sounds like a go, no-go protocol and a shutdown procedure.
Yeah, and then so that has been an unfortunate fact that it didn't work on the Healy very well. When you imagine ice breaking, right? Like how does ship break ice? It goes bam, and then the entire meter data is, and it's not gonna work. So we don't know which genius came up with that vision 3 as almost unbreakable.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And you don't want to go back with that, right?
No.
No. So, anything else? What's coming up? So dry dock, shipyard period, if you have extended period that particularly kind of shut down the entire electricity for work, let us know. So far, I think this particular meter, as far as we shut down properly, starting up is pretty quick, within like a day, or it doesn't take a day to warm up and stabilize the meter. the sensor itself. So unlike that BGM3, we always had to find a plug everywhere, and it's not good.
And you have
I
to
know.
with the US passport.
I
and you have to have a
know,
battery,
I
and you have to
know.
have the ferries and rental cars.
Down to
Right.
Tasmania, yeah.
Exactly. So that won't happen. It's much simpler. But I know any machine, you don't want to just shut off, immediately. So let's plan on that. So your ship, and then Thompson, you go for the long period of dry dock or shipyard.
Yeah, so we'll hopefully go to the shipyard at the end of this year. So the idea is to take it out and turn it off. And turn it back on. when we're
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
Bride did come out of shipyard earlier this year. And we did the exact same thing. Fortunately, we're leaving San Diego and then going up to Alameda. So we took we left the stand there, took the little meter out, brought it up to my boss's office. Matt's office. We did have like the little heater meter just to make sure that it was working, and it was, working well while it was sitting. But we left it in there until the ship came back to San Diego. We put it back in, and it started up fine. We didn't have any problems with it. So that would be our plan this year. Fortunately, we're leaving what's holding in Tampa, so we'll find a place for it to be stored. But the idea is we'll do the same thing: is take it off and plug it back in when we're done.
Okay, so in a situation like, Talcahuano for us, would you still want it removed if we don't really have a place for it, or what would your recommendation?
So is vessel the safest place?
Like,
Perhaps,
yeah.
yeah, then
We
don't,
don't have the infrastructure.
yeah, then I would suggest to keep it on the vessel behind, keyed door, or if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, we have a good room that locks and everything.
Yeah, and I think Thompson is probably going through the so-called 5-year regular maintenance period of this DGS meter. For the first time among any other operators. So we'll see how we can do it, because they're gonna go, I think they're gonna be in the shipyard in Singapore. So we need to pack up the sensor and then send that to DGS in Colorado and somehow ship that back. And hopefully it's just FedEx in and out.
I missed the first part. Why does the sensor need to go back to?
The DGS recommends, and then we would be very curious, the wear and tear of these meters, and then so the 5 years-ish of the use, constantly basically moving, on a ship, they would like us to send that sensor to just check everything, and then they're gonna do the new calibration, get the new INI file that goes with the meter, and then for the processor that you to internally process the data. So
Speaking of the INI file, I found that was interesting. The DGS, none of the tie data, we don't apply it to.
no, so
The BGM, the graph.
So-
we used to
it's okay.
it was applied to it, right? And you would see the changes reflected in the software.
So we do not, there are the column that calls in the manual process data. That is not necessarily processed with the tie data yet. So the two things to remember: one, no matter how you are going to apply this tie correction, it's all very simple plus minus arithmetics. So that if we are seeing the 0.2 milligauss difference here, as far as our processes or QA process and also post-processing is consistent manner, this will stay like this. If you're, changing the protocol, it fluctuates. And the second important part is this is still we call the relative gravimeter. We trust when it was calibrated and they get that value from manufacturer will stay as is? Probably not. And then that's why we do the gravitype, land type to see that slight change. And as far as that is going with this very kind of more or less linear trend over time, we call it again calcium. Yeah. But thank you so much for looking into details, comment. It's always inspiring to like, oh, come email me. What's up? No, we learn from all these Q&A, so please ask us questions. Anything that you want to share or ask us to implement moving forward? This is a time.
You know, if
Eric,
you want me to
okay.
drive that out from Lafayette after the calibration. Let me know if you want somebody to drive that back from Lafayette, back from Colorado.
Okay. Anything, Eric, you want to point out? No? Okay. Are you the land time master now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, yes.
Masako, are you guys hoping for a gravity tie at any port that has one available? I know on our side of the house, if it's an MG&G cruise, then they'll fight and we'll get the time in the port call to make a gravity tie. But if it's a bio cruise, they're like,
Yeah, so we prefer though, again, each ship, each underway, we feel we're acquiring a new asset, which is data. So regardless of the subdisciplines of scientists on board, whether or not they check the gravimeter or not, this is a part of the ship system. So accumulation of, for example, PCO2 data over the course of 10 years from this particular part of the southern ocean become all of a sudden extremely important for science. The same thing. So the more you produce and do this annoying tie as frequent as possible, the data gets better. Yes.
On Atlantis, we have the laptop
Mm-hmm.
for our TGS. Is there a plan to migrate to the ground? Or do other ships have laptops for their TGS?
So yes, yes, Lily's nodding, and Carmen's nodding, Maya's nodding. We do have that. I think Atlantis' case, correct me if I'm wrong, they have installed a MATLAB GUI on that laptop so that the using the data file was the easiest. Am I correct? Question back to you is it still on the Velcro? No. Okay, great. What might bother you?
We just leave it open. I don't know, the keyboard's collecting dust. I
see.
It's not very robust,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, to use how?
I agree. Yeah, it's super dusty environment, at least where our setup is. We recently have installed just a rack mount APM console, right? This is like something that could be screwed into any 19-inch rack and the screen can close and slide in and out. But something like that might be an option because the PC itself is, I mean, it's just running a LabVIEW program, right? So it's not doing a lot.
No, just for the so that LabVIEW program is doing two things. One is basically turn on the data acquisition processor in this data pipeline outside of the sensor, if you see the box in the front panel. So that cannot be turned on if we don't start that log view and then hit the logging of the data.
I know we're ending soon, but I do have a quick comment about that. Originally, when we set up the laptop in Gravimeter DGS on Ravel, we had our laptop system in our server room up by our computer lab and the Gravimeter down in like our transducer room. And we were getting we were transiting the South Atlantic and we were getting VMON values that were like unrealistically high. And I have we can talk longer if you want to figure out the problems. But when we talked to Nigel and Dan and everyone else at PFPE, we realized that was most likely an EMI interference. So then we actually had to move the laptop back down to where the DGS is. So if you're thinking of doing a rack mount, I would suggest put it close to the gravity meter and not necessarily far. Or if you do, just make sure the interference is not, because that was our problem. It ended up being, and we were like, what is happening? Why are these things going crazy?
Healy also had that problem.
Yeah.
So ideally, we can close. Okay, ideally, if we can just ingest that data from serial to one of the lab computer without that laptop, right? That would be ideal. If we still need to run that laptop, at least close the lid, closability of the lid, and then again, mirror to the one of the lab computer. Let me relay that to GGS. Thank you. Good input. Good input. Yeah, it's kind of freaky to keep that laptop. So yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for your help.